All right, what's up? We are back with the Fed Up podcast, and I'm here today with a special episode with me, Jordan. What's up, Jordan?
What's up?
And my dad, Mr. Pottle over there. What's up? How's it going?
It's going great. Glad to be here.
And we got a special guest, the person that I think I'm really glad that he decided to do this because he's your perspective I've always really enjoyed, and I think for you to do this with us is something cool because you could have easily just said no. So thanks for being here. It's Mike. What's up, Mike? How you doing?
Hey, doing well.
All right.
Glad to be here with these great
Mostly.
guys.
Yeah.
So to start with, so the goal of this conversation and what we want to do is me and Jordan have a podcast, obviously, if you're watching this, and we agree on a lot of the stuff that we talk about, but we thought it'd be cool to talk to two other people that we love and respect and get some tension going, some different beliefs, some different ways to pursue truth. Because for Jordan and I, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to figure that out in the best of our ability. And I've always enjoyed talks with my dad, enjoyed talks when I have talked to Mike, and it's, you're two people that I respect. So I think that's something that I think would be really cool for other people to get to see. So the goal of this is just to sit here together and to just be real and talk about stuff. It's not about just pouncing on each other, but more just saying what you believe and how and why and all the above. So I just wanted to start there going around. So I wanted to start with you, Dad, and just see, to talk about your version of truth and how you pursue it. And then, Mike, if you want to follow that too, we'll just start there and just get the conversation flowing. So
Okay.
let's do it.
Okay.
Go for it.
Well, I would start by my version of truth in what I believe was brought to me in a manner growing up in a Pentecostal environment. So you would call it extreme church.
Intense. Yeah.
We're speaking in tongues and people falling over, slain in the spirit, and just the holy roller extreme. So my belief was instilled in me in a Sunday morning, Sunday evening, Wednesday midweek, Friday boys group scenario.
It's intense.
So my belief was learning every chapter of the Bible in order, more verses than I could even come close to saying today, and a lot of rules. And when I fast forward 50 years later, realizing that a lot of that is not what I believe is what makes me godly or the person I want to be today. And part of this is talking with you, Ryan, and understanding what you believe is pretty far from the way I raised you. And understanding that your questioning of God and your wrestling with God is not a bad thing. It's just hard for me to understand. And so part of watching these podcasts is to help me understand where your generation is at. And some of it is really tough to understand. Some of it's tough to swallow.
Yeah.
Some of it I think is insane.
Yeah.
Sure.
And some of it I believe is unhealthy.
Yeah.
That's my belief. But as far as my foundation and what I do believe and what keeps me going is the foundation of God and what he is to me and who I am supposed to be in God's eyes and what I am supposed to be. And in that, it gives me hope. It gives me my faith, and it brings me happiness. And that's where I am today.
It's awesome.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So, Mike, let's see, man. So what do you think? What does your pursuit of truth look like?
When I was 5 years old, I lived on a farm, a very remote farm in Iowa, and there was a day when my mom came out and we had a we had a well and a cistern, and we had a pump, an electric pump that would pump the water out of the well into the cistern. And my mom got all four of us, myself, my brother, and my two sisters, and stood us out by this pump. And she said, "You leave this pump alone. You don't do anything with this pump. You stay away from it. It's dangerous." She said, "It's pumping water into the cistern, but just stay away from it when it's running." So the next day, I went out to the pump because that was just fascinating to me.
Sure.
And so I go out to the pump and I'm looking at it, I'm watching it, and it's loud, it's running. My sisters and brothers are in the backyard and playing on a rope swing, and so I started playing with this pump, and you know, the belt's going around on the pulley, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I touch my fingers and I start rubbing my hands on this belt, and all of a sudden my hand slipped, went through the pulley and cut off the tips of my fingers, my two middle
Lord.
fingers. So I look down and blood is everywhere, and I just go, "Oh no,
Oh,
man, am I in trouble?" I go run up to the screen door of the house and yell for my mom. I don't go in because I got blood all over, and she comes out and I got blood running down my hand, my arms, and she says, "What's going on?" I said, I cut my fingers." She put me inside, rinsed my hands off, saw what happened, and ran out, called my dad, and they ran me to the doctor's office, and he worked on my fingers a little bit, and then they said afterwards, "Okay, so tell us what happened." I said, "Oh, I was out playing on the rope swing, and I got caught, and I cut my fingers off." They believed me. So they believed me. Okay.
Yeah.
They believed me till I was in high school, and I told them the truth.
Oh man.
They always thought that's what happened. My dad went out the next day with a knife and cut the rope swing off the tree. Yeah, this ain't gonna happen anymore. Cuts the rope swing off the
Dang.
tree. Okay. So at that point in my life, when I'm 5 years old, what do you think truth was to me? Truth to me was lying works.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It always does until it doesn't.
Yeah. But I mean, that was,
Yeah.
5 years old, and you're just going, wow.
It's the most
And my
powerful.
parents believed me.
Yeah, it's so powerful.
So, then fast forward in high school, and, I didn't grow up necessarily really very religious. I mean, we went to church, but, was not really involved, and it wasn't really so-called Christian type church, so to speak, but went to church, and in high school, then I was, introduced to God and Jesus, and I felt like, okay, this is the truth. This seems like the truth to me.
Mm.
But I think for me, truth has been a progression.
Mm.
It's not something that's always been constant, because truth requires faith, and I think your truth grows when your faith grows, and whatever it is that you think is truth, because basically, from my standpoint, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free.
Yeah.
And you all know the verse. Everybody knows that verse, I think.
Yeah.
But does it really mean anything to you? And it wasn't until much later in my life, seriously, much later in my life, that I really understood that verse.
Mm.
And that truth really could set you free. So, that's just kind of a little progression of the whole thing of truth,
Yeah.
because I think it can change for people.
Mm.
And it did for me. Because lying was great. I became a very good liar.
Yeah.
Really.
Huh. I think it's a really good way of putting it, because I mean, where Jordan and I kind of come into this is that progression piece, and I think that's where it's different. And I want to hear more what you have to say about this too, Jordan. where that progression was. Because for us, you know, especially in Christian private school, you know, and then, you know, for my road of studying theology and getting a bachelor's and a master's in it to really like try to hone in on what I believed and how it progressed in this weird way that I never expected, to where it almost looked like it dropped off, and then I actually maybe feel like it actually didn't, and it progressed in a way I didn't expect it to. But that progression of truth is something we talk about all the time. So how, I mean, how did it look like for you with your progression of truth, with you coming from a private school to us going to the same school and then having that same faith, and then everything that happened to you where you changed too? How does that progression look?
That's a good question. Well, it's so interesting. You mentioned the verse. I don't know where it's at in that good old book, but the, when you know the truth will set you free. I think at face value, it seems like a very simple equation in terms of like know what is intrinsically honest, and that's the path that will set you free. And for me, I always believe that to be true, but it's a really sensitive verse for me because my dad, who was employed by God, and uh, you guys, I mean, it's very interesting because you guys knew me since I was itty bitty, and um, you guys had absolutely no idea what was going on behind closed doors, and it was also my job to enable and keep up that facade of my father being perceived in the public eye as being on God's payroll. And that's a lot of pressure for a child who was the primary recipient of his self-hate and the level of hypocrisy and daily contradiction of being in a Christian school, going to church, just eat, sleep, breathe the sweet baby Jesus. And you can imagine how confusing and stressful and anxious, and let alone the concept of God being a fatherly figure. It was very intense. And that verse specifically, my father used in an email he sent to my siblings and my mother, and it conveyed, this is after the divorce, after I spent a lot of time encouraging my mom to get away from him, and the toxicity and the brainwashing of my mom feeling like it was a healthy thing to stay in the marriage just to blindly be committed to a man who's ruining your life, and finally got her away from him. And those emotional scars in her are probably not reversible at this point. And the key point about the verse is he sent an email after all the chaos ensued, separation. He sent an email admitting to a lot of, just to respect whatever dignity he has left. I won't say the details of it, but basically he alluded to my mom had the right under biblical law to separate, and you guys can fill in the blank what he had been doing and exploring to give her the freedom to go be divorced and find other happiness. And he used the verse saying how, referring to his honesty with his ability to be honest about the disgustingness of his choices, he referenced that verse to say, you know, basically it's a fresh start for me, and almost had this like egotistical, like this is a great new beginning for me, and not really taking ownership of the chaos and the horrific trail of sadness he left behind. It was just kind of this like, I have this fresh start, and it was like this such sick pride protecting his lack of humility. So for me, that verse is a massive trigger, and it actually was a beautiful thing because it caused me to really, really get at the heart of that verse in terms of, from a Christianity standpoint, because Jesus very specifically says, I am the truth, I am the way, I am the life. So for me, and I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on this, but there's a much bigger component to truth just being simplistically just being honesty. I think truth biblically, from my perspective, was the life lived, the choices made of who Jesus was. And the reason why I think he's like the most gangster human that ever lived, and why he's caused such radical chaos in life, period, uh, is he believed what he believed to death. And the humility in which he lived his life and the acceptance he had to be crucified. Um, my the point I want to make is that it's so much bigger than being honest. The depth of who Jesus was and what he taught through parables and metaphors, it's so heavy, and the core of it, the humility, um, it's so powerful. And um, I would be curious to hear what um, your guys' thoughts are regarding just that verse specifically, because for me it almost has nothing to do with just being honest. For me it's so much deeper. And if you get at the heart of what Jesus's parables taught about, and his humility, riding on a donkey, like not doing anything in a means to gain worldly possessions, but living the most humble life possible. I think there's a big separation between truth setting you free and realizing it was the life decisions of who Jesus was, and the sacrifice and the humility and the willingness to the night before he gets crucified, like wash his disciples' feet and basically non-verbally tell them, like, life is not about gaining and conquering. It's about giving of self sacrificially.
So, what, to clarify, what's your question?
So specifically with that verse, to what degree does truth set you free? Or is it, in your perspective, is it not just about honesty? Is it about instead the life of Jesus specifically? And because you both, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys are fully committed to Jesus being the only way to a life after death. Like there being, discussing truth. Truth implies that there's a wrong, there's a deceit, and you brought up deceit and lies. So, I mean, you can take this whatever way you want. Like, to what degree does truth in your hearts push you to live a mirrored life like Jesus? Because that's ultimately what Jesus said, is like, be perfect as I am perfect. So to what degree do you feel you are, as men, in retrospect, looking back at your lives, how much has your life mirrored the perfection that Jesus has called you to? And where is that going to take you ... in the rest of your life? And at the end of the whole thing, is there a hell and a heaven? You know, it's a big, broad... There's probably 73 questions in there. So fortunately, there's no wrong answer. If you pick one of the 73, you're going to nail it. So it's just, I think it's just such a unique, provoking verse for me. It's just so funny to me that because that was my dad's drop the mic verse, and I haven't seen him in years. And I won't even get into it. This is not about my dad. So,
Yeah.
All right. Who's got it? Anybody? You got 73 options.
You know, I'll just give you a little perspective for me on what you said. First of all, how my life mirrored walking with God. Not very well.
Yeah.
Okay, I've struggled with that. I struggled with the example that my father was to me of a Christian spirit, not in probably any way that you did, but my father just being a very strong-willed, confrontational East Coast guy that right way, wrong way, dad's way, first two don't matter.
You mentioned rules.
So he was a rule guy.
Yeah.
Curfew, 9 o'clock. You weren't home, he locked the door. Mom would leave the window open. We'd try sneaking in. Dad would be waiting for you inside the window. Okay? So realizing the damage of what that can cause, it set my brothers and I into a peril of we just spiraled out of control. So what time gives you is perspective. So at a National Prayer Breakfast 5 or 6 years ago, you know, a lot of people speak into your life. I'm one that 99.9% goes in one ear and out the other.
Yeah.
That 0.5% sticks with me for life. Paul Young, the writer of The Shack, was the speaker. And the word he said that just radiated through me was he said it took 50 years for him to wipe his dad's face away from the face of God.
Hmm.
So he couldn't see God because of all the hatred and anger and hurt that he had, that his dad caused him. And it really made me think about my dad. And, you know, my dad died a couple years ago, and we didn't have a great relationship, but he came back, and it was a really nice, God gave us this gift of like a year to have conversation.
Awesome.
And after talking to my father, I realized that my dad loved me. But his love wasn't anything like what I wanted it to be. His love wasn't the big hugs, son, I love you type hugs. That, you know, whatever my sons think of me, I'm a hugger. We go on construction jobs, and I walk up and I hug my sons. I want them to know that I love them. I want them to know that I'm not right all the time. And I'll admit I'm wrong. I'll say I'm sorry. But the biggest thing I don't want to be is the reason why they don't serve God, because of my hypocrisy.
I think that's a really important point. Is you, in your opening statement, you know, observing your son, you know, each of you having a front row seat to each other's evolutions of spirituality or lack thereof, or wherever you're at. You mentioned, you know, several adjectives that were not super pumped about where he is in terms of perceiving or not perceiving truth. And do you believe, how do you think, because as you said, it's like every father wants the next generation, especially like that son, that father relationship, so powerful to bestow upon what I believe I want you to absorb. And for that, you know, third generation of your father now to Ryan, from you seeing him grow and grow away from what you perceive to be true, how much do you, especially in that father figure and God being a father figure in this religion you're talking about, how do you think you impressed upon or helped facilitate Ryan's steering away from, to some degree? How much do you think you impacted his spiritual walk?
I think, well, you'd have to ask Ryan for that, but I think it definitely had some impact on him. But I'm okay with a lot of what Ryan thinks. I'm okay with him questioning God and questioning his faith. I am. Now, I don't agree with, you know, a lot of what he thinks, but I go back to one thing that I talked to Ryan about, and you guys could expand on this. What I have built my foundation on is that Jesus is my Lord and Savior, that believing in him, I believe there is a heaven and a hell. I believe that the bottom line is not a bunch of rules, is do I love God and can I love my neighbor? That means, can I love my son? Can I love you? Can I love Mike? Okay? I don't need all the other rules. I believe that the way I was raised, you had to go to church. If you weren't, you know, going to church, you were a sinner. I mean, that's the brainwashing that we got.
Yeah.
I don't believe any of that was of God. I believe that was man's way of controlling you. So as far as what Ryan thinks, what you think, my question to you and what I brought to him is, what is your foundation? What is your hope and your faith bring you? So when I've watched you guys, the 3.5, I've watched about as much as Mike watched. The one thing that radiates out to me is you two look unhappy. You two can look miserable in the prime of your life. Okay? And that bothers me as my son, as a husband, as a dad. I want my son to be happy. I want you to be happy. Okay? And if you don't have that strong foundational piece, I don't know how you are. You're always searching. You're always searching and you're searching and you're looking. And I don't know what's ever out there that's going to find. You're going to find it's going to bring you happiness. So that's what you need to tell me. Am I wrong in my perception of you two? I mean, when I hear your life, you had some horror in your life. But in grief and in pain and the difference in my life, I'll just expand on one thing. The pain that came in my life was the opposite of yours. in one way. Mine was self-inflicted. Yours wasn't. You had to bear a burden that shouldn't have been yours. And so that's a whole different world.
Yeah.
It's easy for me to say, hey, I screwed up.
Mhm.
It would be a lot harder to be you. And I try to understand that piece. But what is your hope? What brings you happiness? And where do you see this going?
Boom.
Big question. I like it though.
Me specifically?
Sure.
Sweet.
Yes.
Cool. Well, I mean, I really appreciate your honesty and transparency, and frankly, happiness is. I think it's a luxury in life to find it and attain it and experience it, and I don't know if it's because, like you differentiated, the pain was self-inflicted to a degree in your life, and the pain was gifted to me. And I think a byproduct of, and I'm not going to say, and I've said this before, like I don't think pain and abuse or toxic things that have happened in life. I don't think it's the degree that matters. I think it's how it affects you. And I think very subtle things can ruin people's lives. A little comment here can ruin a person's life to a degree, and that's very sincere. So I'm not going to say my pain was special, but what it did was it robbed me of happiness, potentially irreversibly. And I can say I am happy when I'm with my daughter. There's moments where I feel really happy, but then there's a lot of moments where I feel a lot of anxiety about the weight of having a front row seat of what not to do. The reason why I can be an incredible father, and I believe I am, is because I have the blueprint for what not to do. So in the same way I asked you 73 questions, you couldn't get any of them wrong, just pick one. It's like I have 100 million things not to do, and it's like, well, just avoid those, and I'm going to be an all-star, And I don't know how to evoke a feeling of happiness inorganically. I know that my goal as a byproduct of the things I've experienced in life is to find peace. That's the place I want to find. That's where I want to be anchored all the time, because happiness is a feeling that is conditioned off of specific experiences. So I think that's why happiness can be a very dangerous thing, because it's a conditional way of living, to where if I am happy, if I have this perfect situation, then my life will be more fulfilling. In my experience, because I've been blessed with very unhappy moments, I can now, as a grown-ass man, take ownership and not be a victim of anything, and sincerely forgive my dad from a very heart level place. I can look at all the pain that I went through and see that was a gift. Like, that was a gift. The way I can perceive things, and a big reason why I feel super alone all the time and don't really have a friend outside of Ryan that I can relate to on some degree, is because of the things I've experienced. And I don't really have hope in anything. I have an infinite curiosity for what matters, and I actively bust my ass to invest energy into exploring what that means. And I have found a lot of peace in the courage it takes to say, I know I don't know what ultimate truth is. I know I will never know from a evidence-based perspective, and I think there is breadcrumbs that lead you in directions in a lot of different spiritual realms that I've explored, and a lot of there is a harmony and a synchronicity in a lot of different world religions, and I think a lot of it stems from what you said, is loving your neighbor as yourself. And I think value in life is found from seeking to manifest and understand what truth is, and to live from that place. And the happiness element I don't know how to get that. But what I do know in terms of what I hope and what I press towards and what fuels that is, after I got diagnosed with cancer, the night that really was the big transition for me. After all the stuff that going through as a young guy and dealing with horrific self-hate, and we talked about the eating disorder and being a young man with an eating disorder that took me to my deathbed, and I'm very fortunate to be alive. Like, that's a level of self-hate that is brutal, to self-mutilate and not even to love yourself so minimally that you actively, slowly do not let yourself even consume a calorie because you hate yourself that much. And to get past that and to get healthy and then get diagnosed with the cancer, I was at a point with my wife, and she said she saw my depression and the hopelessness, and that's the thing I'm trying to talk about, is the hope. The most hopeless night of my life is when my wife asked me, she said, "Do you believe in God anymore?" And I said in tears, I looked at her, I was like, "Fuck no." And she was sobbing, and she had tried to have hope enough for both of us for a long time, but mine had gone. And I felt absolutely nothing. I felt calm saying that. And what's interesting is what happened after owning that and actually articulating it. The peace I had and the freedom I had to verbally own and stop pretending that I believed in a thing that I don't. Because the thing about truth is it's experience based. You believe what you believe, you believe what you believe, you believe what you believe, based off of your incredibly subjective, unique experience. You want to tap into an objective truth and be like, I'm with the Crips and we're better than the Bloods and we'll always win. It's like we want to be guilty by association with the winners of spirituality. And what happened for me is I found so much freedom in finally saying, I know I don't know. And I finally gave myself the thing that no one ever gave me, and I believed that was okay, because it allowed me to start tiptoeing towards, if I don't know, if I'm still alive, and diagnosis with the cancer, my wife was pregnant. I was motivated by that paternal instinct to, I better fucking figure this out because I'm gonna have a daughter, and I actually ended up writing her a book. And I actually gave you the first copy of it. And
You did.
And it was my artistic way of expressing to her, like, "Hey, Slugger, if I'm not here, just wanted to let you know your dad was crazy, crazy in love with you as much as he's able to be." And it started an incredible ignition in my soul to seek truth. So there was so much freedom in finally owning the one thing I know is I don't know. Because it gives me this skeleton key to never being inside a box, and giving me a false sense of security that I have to protect something and I have to defend something. That's why I can genuinely sit here and be like, please tell me something that'll help me, give me some hope. Because frankly, like, I feel so sad all the time, and I do everything in my power to take care of myself through nutrition, through working out, meditation, spiritual reading, writing, everything I do with Ryan. This whole thing is, I wish I had, when I was a young boy, I wish I had a computer I could turn on and listen to some dude like Ryan be like, "Hey, Slugger, life is hard and it's confusing, and just keep on keeping on, and here is some perspective." Because as a young boy, I mean, you're just suffocated in that prison of like-minded, hypocritical people. You don't know there's other thoughts to even think, So that's why I'm here, and I am so pumped about knowing that I don't know, because it allows me to learn anything, and I'm open. So I have no hope, but it gives me peace, because it allows me to be perceiving and absorbing of something that could affect me. I don't have anything to defend. And I would be super duper pumped if you guys have something really profound to say to fix my sadness.
Well, I think I don't want to sell you short on what you just said, because you say that you have no hope. But when I feel like we talk, you have hope.
I
You-
have peace.
and-
I have peace.
And I feel like it's peace, but there's still little breadcrumbs of hope in there, because you even latching onto the idea that you know you don't know gives you peace, but it also gives you hope in the sense that, like, this is part of the process, right?
Yeah.
You're trusting in the process.
Yeah.
And this is why it's cool talking about this stuff, because we're processing it right now.
Yeah.
And that's part of it too. So I don't think it's as hopeless and dire as it could come across, because when I talk to you, I don't, I see the sadness, but I do see the happiness as well.
Yeah.
And I see the hope come through, even though I don't necessarily think that you're aware of it all the time.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
It makes sense. I would say the sadness that you perceived in the 3.5 episodes, the anger or the rage, whatever. I'm an intense dude, period, and I'm not afraid to express what I believe to be true, and that can come across and be perceived. If you don't know my heart, that can be. I'm sure I look crazy, and I'm okay with that. But at where my heart is anchored, I don't seek happiness. I'm super pumped when a happy moment could happen with my daughter, or I spend an honest moment with another human being and have an honest connection with them. That brings me some level of joy. But the peace I have is I don't need those to have fulfillment, and I find fulfillment in doing my best to evolve and take ownership of all the chaos that's been in my life and not be a victim of it, because I've learned a hell of a lot in all the pain. And I think anything worth anything comes from a place of chaos and cultivating. So what little I have to share from experience-based wisdom, I'm wanting to pay it forward to the young girl or guy that was in a very similar position that I was in. So I feel some level of responsibility. It's not fun to fillet yourself out here. It's not fun. It's at all. But I think it's important, and that's what brings me some level of happiness. It's because I feel fulfilled.
Good.
Going back to some of your 73 questions.
Yeah, which one you gonna pick?
Yeah, the truth. So the truth for me is, I think there has to be a basis, and the basis to me is Jesus Christ, who I believe is God, came to the earth in a human format, and to teach us a lot. And one of the things you're saying, the question you're asking, or we're asking, was, are you really following Jesus? Are you really doing like Jesus came here? Riding donkeys and I always had that. I had that conflict when I was young. After I became a Christian, and because I can remember saying to myself, man, I really want that mansion on the hill, but I really would just be fine just having nothing. There was a real conflict in my life, because I felt like, am I gonna just do kind of like some of the stuff that Jesus talked about in the Bible, and not go after the riches and all that type of stuff. And so it was a real conflict. And it was such a conflict in my life that it turned me to other types of religions. I studied Ram Dass and, Be Here, Be Now, and, and looked at a lot of different things and, trying to figure it all out. But I always just came back to the real base for me, the real base truth for me was that I believed in Jesus Christ. And, to me, he just came onto this planet and he just blew it up. He just blew everything up. And I think that was exactly what he was supposed to do, just break everything apart. And the only thing that I can say is that in my life as I progressed, because I never reached the mansion I never got to be a king sitting up on a mansion on the hill, and I did come out of homelessness, but so I'm somewhere in the middle. But I think what I learned was, after getting married, after having kids, that it does really change your life, because you can't go on just living exactly the way Jesus Christ did, because you have other responsibilities. Jesus was not married. Jesus didn't have kids, right? So it puts you in a different situation than he was in, and so it changes the direction of your life and what you do. And I think for me, trying to study these other things and trying to figure it out and find out there was something else besides what I had learned, um, I started neglecting other things in my life.
Mhm.
You know, you start not focusing on your wife, you start not focusing on your kids, and not giving them the attention, and other things in your life, loving your neighbor, doing good things for people, you know, because you're so focused on yourself that all of a sudden everything else what goes away. And so what I found was getting back and focusing on those things was extremely fulfilling to me, you know, because kind of like Keith said, you know, my father never once said I love you, never once when I was growing up.
It's heavy.
I don't ever remember that. Okay.
How does it make you feel right now? Just saying that.
It's always bothered me. But the thing is the greatest thing that ever happened to me, because you know all my kids, you know all my kids.
Unfortunately. Casey.
Yeah. You know, how many times have I said to him I love him? How many times have I hugged him? I mean, I used to joke around with him saying, just whatever you do, don't ever come and hug me in public. That would be the most embarrassing thing you could ever do to me. And of course, that was just, then they were just always hugging me in public, you know, which is, you know, it was just a game. But
Sure.
but the point is that, man, I learned from those things, because I also said, you know, when my father, you know, went out on my mom and had affairs and got divorced, it was horrible for me. It was a horrible thing, you know. I mean, you know, I was 19 years old. I was still, to me now today, seemed very young, but it really impacted me. You know, I couldn't talk to my dad for years after that. But again, to me, it was something that was really good, because I said to myself, I'm going to be married, and I'm going to be married for my entire life. I'm going to be married to one person for my entire life. And I don't know if I would have been. I don't know if that's really what would have happened to me if my dad hadn't did what he did. Okay, so the thing is that what I've learned through life, and because I'm so much older than you, both of you guys, it's amazing to sit back at this point in your life and look back through everything and the experiences that you have, and realize how much you've learned and how much your life changes over the years. It's just unbelievable. And it's just like you're saying right now. I just wish I would have had somebody that was there, that would have been saying, hey, hang in there, buddy. You know, you're going to make it. This is going to be all right. Other people have been through this. You know, I think if there's anything in my life that I really try to do, it's exactly that.
Yeah.
That's why I like a relationship with Ryan. That's why I like a relationship with Steve, your brother.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, I have other friends, and I have, you know, the same sort of relationships. That's why I have a relationship with you, because I care about you. But more importantly, I don't have the answers for you. I don't have any secrets for you. But what I can do is share my experiences with you, and share with you what I have learned. And I think that's what we did in raising our kids. And I think some of the stuff both of you guys can attest to, because you know my kids, but we taught our kids to be very independent.
Mm-hmm.
We taught them to think for themselves. Yes, sure. We took them to church. They went to Sunday school. They went to a Christian, you know, elementary and high school. But we always taught them to be independent, because in our minds, both my wife and I realized that, you know what, every person's choice in their relationship with God has to be an independent individual choice. And it's never too late for that till you die. But the point is that it still has to be, your son can go along and he can accept Christ at 6 or 7 years old because he doesn't want to go to hell. He's scared, right? He doesn't want to go to hell. So he tells mom, I don't want to go there. God, what do I have to do?
Yeah.
Okay. But the point is, that's not the end of it for him. He's got to make those decisions. He has to come to another point in his life and make that decision that, is this the truth for me? Is this really true? And that's what we taught them. And like getting back to the truth and lying, and I think of my son, and I've never in my life known someone more honest than my son. Never. Nobody. I've never known anybody more honest than my son. He can't lie. Every day my wife would say to him, kids, don't lie. Just whatever you do, don't lie. Just tell the truth. And my son would tell the truth. And I've seen him in a situation. I know you've seen him situations where sometimes he should lie. Hey, how's this hat look on me? Well, it actually doesn't look very good. Why doesn't it look good? Well, your head's really fat, and your eyes are too big, and but the point is, I'm just going, Casey, okay, that's the point where I thought he had a situation in a job where he was working, and the guy really screwed him over on a real estate deal, and the guy called him a liar, and my son practically killed him, was going to kill him, and saying, don't ever call me a liar. I have no reason to lie. Why would I lie?
Yeah.
So anyway, the thing is that I'm just, what I've learned in my lifetime is to get back and focus on things around me. You have to stay focused on yourself to an extent, but you have to be careful, because too much focus on yourself, I think, can be detrimental to people and things around you and the things you're supposed to do in your life.
So part of the thing that I wanted you to expand on, Ryan, was part of our conversation we had down in Arizona. Because I said the same thing I said to you, to Ryan, down in Arizona. So I've said to Ryan at mornings at 5:30 in the morning, and look at him and go, man, you look kind of happy. I've said it to him more than once, right? I do. You just don't look like a happy person. Why is that? I mean, you're in the prime of your life, you're a good-looking kid, you got intelligence, beautiful wife, 2 beautiful boys, a good job. Life's been kind to you. If you're not smiling, nothing terrible has happened to you. If you're not smiling now, when are you ever going to smile? And I wanted him to explain that.
Explain what? Why I didn't smile?
Why aren't you smiling, Ryan?
Why you see the struggle you have with being you and struggling with your belief.
Oh, sure. Well, to go back on 2, I'll start where Mike just was kind of talking about with honesty, and that's kind of where the rabbit hole went for me, because when I was in seminary and I was pursuing wanting to, teach theology or teach the Bible and all of that, I guess I had this thought come over me, and it was more of this thought of I remember sitting, I think it was in Hebrew class, and I'm just thinking about stuff. I'm like, man, how do I know all this stuff is true? You know what I mean? And it's just that question just kept swirling around. Most of the time I brushed it off. I got really good at answering it by going to Search Ministries and learning apologetics and every reason why I should just have an answer for this thing, and learning all the answers to the nth degree, which So it came to a point of honesty, and that's where I felt like for the first time I really started to be really honest with myself. And I said, you really don't. I asked myself, so if I grew up on the other side of the planet, what would make me find the truth if this was the truth? There's nothing in my life at that time that would have got me out of what I'm in. Right. I literally would have, and this is where I was honest, I would believe in wherever I was put. There's nothing exceptional about me to get me out of this. There's nothing I've done in my life, everything around there has just helped reinforce what I've wanted to be true.
Mhm.
And that's where it kind of broke apart. I realized how much I wanted it to be true. I still, like I talked about with you, I would love for it to be true, just because that's this fairy tale I have of dying and going to this cloudy place where, you know, all my family is, and you just kumbaya, right?
Yeah.
But the part of me that, like, it was like the light finally flipped on was the honest pursuit. And honest as far as I could search myself and ask myself what God was. And everything, every tenet that held that faith that got tested was hollow. It was like taking a chisel and just realized, shoo, taking a chisel and shoo. Some of it took a lot of wax because I knew a lot of Jeff's arguments, you know? So I kept chiseling at it to understand, but that's what happened. And the more it all just fell apart. Right. And so for me, when you talk about not being happy, because for the longest time I felt like what Jordan's talking about, there's this sadness that comes over you. And like we talked about in a couple episodes before, when God is something that is your world, your identity, where you are pursuing teaching something like that, as arrogant as that sounds, and it all falls apart, there's a level of grief that is really hard to describe. Because when everyone around you believes in something you want to be true that you can't, it's a horrible place to be.
How did it fall apart?
That's what. Yeah. So I'll expand on that a little more. So it fell apart by that. It was me being as honest as I possibly could. I asked myself, like, what is anchoring me to this? Like, I love this dude Jesus enough where I'm going to study the Bible as well as I could to help other people love Jesus. That's how much I love Jesus. When you asked who am I am someone who loves Jesus and wants to follow Jesus. That's where it was for the longest time. But when the honesty light finally switched on, that's when I couldn't get over the fact that so many reasons were anchoring me to this dude because I wanted him to be true. But so much it was based in fear. It was based in fear because what if he's not true? And that was something I was unwilling to deal with for the longest time. You just don't want to deal with it. You know, you do the Pascal's wager thing where it's like, oh, if God's not true, at least I'm a good person. If he's true, great, I get to go to heaven. That doesn't really work, though, because the problem is if it's not true, then you're stuck in this, like, almost like a prison of whatever belief you're in. And why I was in a belief that I felt like made me a morally good person, it has for our lives. Let's, you know, I've watched how so many Christians in our family have been such great people, like Nana, for example, right? Where it's just are profoundly awesome, wonderful people. But that isn't enough to make it true, because you could take people and pick from all over the planet, and they have the same reasoning for that. So to me, it was finally realizing how much my belief in God was based in fear, and it was buried so deep that I felt like it was just buried in good intentions constantly, until I finally started to expose how much it wasn't fear. And that was the hardest part, was dealing with that, if that makes sense. So yeah, so, you know, part of that process was looking and, like, realizing, man, I don't feel like this is real. The Bible I thought that was true isn't as solid as I thought. So part of me wanted to be like, screw this stuff, right? I'm sure you were around during that time where I was angry, bitter. I know Brittany was. You can just ask her about it. Where it was something that was really hard because I felt duped. It wasn't as strong. Like, nothing anyone could say, or, you know, one of my favorite authors was Tim Keller, who has such a great reason to believe in Jesus and all these people. Like, there's just, it doesn't answer to the level that I feel like I needed it to answer. And there was this process of going through where I wanted just to be like, you know what? I want everybody in my life to see the fake that it was. That's what I wanted to do, because I felt like it was a prison cell, that it's masked in this idea of like, hey, you can come to prison. It's going to make you a great person. We have counselors there to keep you going good. And it's like, no, I don't want people to be like that, because it's that closed-mindedness that I really despise when it's like that. So part of going through that was moving through that and helping to understand and see why people believe it, and how they could stay attached to it, and learning what the Bible is and what it could be, and learning what faith really means. And to me, it was learning that faith is way more open than I ever gave it credit for. It was something that I was more like, this is it, right? Like we had to talk. Like this is truth. This is it. To me, that's not faith. That's just like you're locked in your beliefs. Because I feel like, which can open up to another part of this topic now, is I feel like I finally have faith in God, and my faith in Jesus looks way different than your guys' faith. And that's and I don't expect you to understand how that looks, but it's way different because I don't necessarily think the Bible's the whole. I think it's a big part of it, and I think so much of what Jesus said is true and real, but I don't think it's all of it. And I don't necessarily think that like Jesus being the only way is that you take that verse to the bank. I don't. I think Jesus can show you God and what's real in a way that's profound, but I don't think it's the only way. And I don't think it's like you have to accept this life preserver, otherwise you're going to be in this lake of fire. I don't think it's anything like that. So in going through this whole process and understanding, I felt like what helped with me is it helped me have a level of insight that I don't know, I really didn't feel equipped for. So part of why I felt sad all the time is like I told you the other day. I felt sad because I could look at people and see them differently than I ever had before. So the hard part is when I go to work and we're around broken dudes all day long and some of the most broken people on this planet we work with, it's just sad sometimes. There's times I'm happy where it could be, I get to work with my dad and brother. There's challenges in that, which is great because it helps us unify that we never would have. We've said that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's days where it's sad to me because it's just like, yeah, you know what? I get tired of feeling like that. I don't want to feel like I'm judging people. It's more like I could just see like, man, it sucks that I hear someone's all they want to do is drink and fish and, talk bad about their wives and show pictures of people that they're cheating on and all this stuff. It's just not a world that I'm like, man, it's just being in this broken world all the time. So part of why I'm sad is because it sucks to see that every day.
But here's my problem with that. What I've said, my belief is mainstream belief. I believe the stuff that you are struggling thinking is the only way. My belief is it is the only way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? That's just what I believe. I have peace with it. I'm good with it. Okay? I'm not searching out there to find. When I listen to you just now, you have this judgmental piece that you can see something that everyone else can't. And you're going to have to be the one to explain that to me so I can understand who you are. And so you can open up this whole new world to me of something you can't explain. So you've been searching for this for years. You've been on this, right? You've been looking and expanding something. And I'm saying, so what else is there? What have you found to take the place of what I believe gives me peace? What is out there and what do you see is out there for you for a foundational piece that makes you happy, that you don't have to worry about if I see God the way you do or Brittany sees God the way you do.
Yeah.
But we can just have peace of existing. I'm never going to think the way you think. Okay, so does that mean we can't have a relationship and we can't have discussion? We can, but all I care about is you having peace and you having happiness. Okay, so when you're searching for that, and you're saying, well, I'm stuck in this rut. I've got this box I'm in, and you know what? My box, I'm only in it, man. The sides are up, and I've got the lid closed, and I'm good. It is. I mean, I'm not searching for anything else out there. I believe what I believe, not because I was raised in it. I've had doubts. I've walked away for years. Went on the dark side for a decade. I've done all that, right? It's not like I lived this holy roll life and never tried anything or tried to experience anything. And you know what? What I came back to was the chaos that I had was the time when I was doing what I wanted to, and I threw everything I believed and trusted in out the window. And when I came back to that and found that, asked God to come in and back and help me, it was a feeling and just a peace that came over me. It was a desire to be a better dad, a better husband, a better employee, just a better person. And I'm thankful for that peace and that contentment. And what I'm saying to you is, there's nothing wrong with looking and exploring and all that, but what I said to you, you've been on this path for a while now, right?
Mhm.
And so, have you progressed in this path? Have you found more that is out there that gives you that peace and believing that you're on the right track? That you can look at someone just as a person,
Mhm.
and I mean, everybody has stuff. I mean, when you talk about guys at work, we don't have to be deep to know that they're broken, messed up people, right?
I get that.
So what I'm
Yeah.
saying is,
Yeah.
but when you look at your father or your brother,
Mhm.
two people that you've struggled with the most, okay, and say, hey, where's that common ground that you and I can share? And like I said, your thoughts, I don't think are all wrong. I don't. I think you have some great thoughts, some thoughts that I would never think about, and I can appreciate that. But where does the search end? Where do you come to a point of peace and say, okay, man, I feel like I finally got it? Or is it a constant, I'm going to look the rest of my life?
So
Great question.
it is a great question. So I think the same feeling that you have, like you settle at Jesus, right? That's where you've arrived, and this is the person, this is your dude, this is the God, right?
Yep.
Right? Who teaches you in all these different ways. It could be a devotional, it could be a sermon, all these different ways. You're learning about God, what's real and true, and what matters constantly.
Mhm.
It's the same process for me. The difference for me is I feel like God is just such a bigger concept where, like, to me, like the thing that I have hope in is God being love, right? And I say God in the sense of like just trying to talk about what it all is, how we're all connected. That's to me is what gives me peace. Just like you have peace that Jesus came and conquered sin so that you can have salvation.
Yep.
I feel like the salvation is there because of who God is and in the position that we find ourselves. It's God is love, and I know in my soul that when I die that everything's going to be okay. That my purpose on this planet is to try to figure out who this person is that's talking to you now, and to try to live according, like, to the whole extent. If I could be Ryan, so that I could be Ryan, so that I could love you, so I could love you, and I could love you, so that I can help bring connection, to bring God in the sense of love in that area. Because to me, that's what it's about. I don't have to call him Jesus. You can call him Jesus if you want to. It doesn't matter to me. I don't look down on you for it. I'm not judging you for it. I'm telling you, you can believe in Jesus just like you can believe in anything else, and it can still rob you. I honestly believe that, like, as you look at idolship and how it works, where you elevate something that's unhealthy, I think God can be that. Because what happens with God is it's the God we make. It's the God we choose. It's the God we create.
True.
And I think the hardest part about that is discovering when he's an idol. And that's what I realized for me. God was an idol, and that idol broke. Now God is there, and he's real, and he's overwhelming to me, where I don't want him to be an idol anymore. As much as I want him to, because it was really comfortable, and I like that. I like this idea of Jesus being something I can understand, where now it's not something I understand. The only thing I understand is I know one thing, that love wins at the end of the day. Love is what it's about. That's such a cliche thing to say, but it's so true, because it's all about connection. That's what we're doing here. We're talking about stuff, connecting in a way that's unique, in a way that helps others see it too.
But that's a point. That's a great point you just made. I believe what you said about what people do with God, I think is really accurate. People don't pursue God in the way that was intended. I believe he's an idol to a lot of people. So I totally believe that. But, are you okay with me believing what I believe and in your wife, who believes a lot more like I believe than what you believe?
Yeah.
And without having to change her, to look at her and just say, I can accept you for your belief even though I don't agree with it, without having to change her.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're home and you think you've got something you want to share, and like, why can't you receive it? I'm telling you something, and I believe this is like what you're missing. Thinking you're trying to help them, and in that causing what I could see causing friction.
Sure. Totally.
So in that, because the whole thing about everything we're talking about, There's no absolutes. I can't sit here and tell you I'm definitely right.
Mm.
You can't sit there and tell me you're definitely right. That's where our faith comes in, right? Faith is the unknown. It's a belief in the unknown, right? So that's the piece in all of this. So I think part of what you say is awesome. I believe it brings up things that people need to hear. I really do. And I don't just say that. I really believe that some of your thoughts are like, man, I would never think of that. But it's a really good thought.
Right.
No, I mean, I think that's the questioning of this stuff that I think is really good. God wants us to question him. He doesn't. It's not just blind faith. It's like, hey, I don't believe everything I hear. You think I have believed everything I've heard in church? Do you think I look at people in church as the example of what I want to be? I mean, the problem we have in life, I say, in our life, we're all groupies. We're all groupies. I got my group. They got their group. And you know what's the really funny part is? We're God-fearing people. Man, we love God. Hallelujah. But I can't stand you. You can't come to my group. I don't even want you around me.
Yeah.
That's how hypocritical we are.
Yeah.
Okay? I mean, do you not think that's a joke?
I do.
It's a total joke.
100%.
You know what my dad used to say to me? And I love the line because it was so my dad. You can believe what I told you? Well, you could be wrong. And that was it. It's like, just listen to me and quit thinking. Right?
Yeah.
And that's what our generation does.
Well, and I think that has a lot to do with, I think it's interesting the way you said it, because I've never actually thought about you saying like God becoming an idol. And unfortunately, that was one of my problems when I was younger, after I had accepted Christ, right?
Mhm.
And then I just went into this huge conflict because I was breaking the rules all the time. Well, the rules was this idol that the church created, this idol of God, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And what was it? It was the church had to have all these rules, right? And I just, and so I now I was kind of happy, and it's, free, and everything was great. And all of a sudden I accept Christ, and then boom, there's this rule and this rule and that rule and that rule, and the church says this and the church says that, and then I'm going, wow, wait a minute, there's one God, but there's 5,000 denominations, and it's not one Baptist church, it's the First Baptist and the Last Baptist and the Third Baptist and the Baptist on Main, and this one believes in smoking, and this one you can drink, and that one and all. I'm going through all that stuff, and I'm going, and then it came to the point when I just remember our pastor of our church, and he stands up and he says, he comes in and he's talking to our youth group, and he's going, okay, so we're going to camp, and just so you know, the rule is no, when the girls are in the pool, no boys can be in the pool. And I'm going, what? No, I'm in San Diego, right?
Yeah.
I'm surfing, I'm swimming, I'm in the ocean, and then I'm just going, what happens? I mean, what's going on? No girls can't swim. And I raise my hand and I go, hey, pastor, so how far does this water thing go? Because if I'm in the ocean, in Ocean Beach, does that mean no girls can be in the ocean in Pacific Beach? I'm going, I don't get it. I don't understand the rule.
Yeah.
And so then it just kind of started breaking down for me, and just going, oh my gosh, I will never be able to live within these rules, which you kind of say it's an idol of God, because let's create our own God, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, because I know, hey, people freak out when I say, I think there's aliens from other planets.
Yeah, sure.
Well, how can you say that? Aren't you a Christian?
Yeah.
Well, okay, there's, well, it can't be because there's nothing in the Bible about it. I said, well, that doesn't mean anything. Just because it's not in the Bible doesn't mean it couldn't be real.
Sure.
So the point is, I think thinking that way is fine. I just, we've got to make those decisions, and we have to see And that's what I've always thought, is that my relationship is my relationship with Jesus Christ. It's not anybody else's relationship. It's my relationship. Nobody can tell me
That's right.
how to have a relationship and how to live with the person that I believe is the truth.
That's right.
It's my relationship. Just stay out of my way.
Ryan, just answer one question before we get on this topic. That when I asked you, and I just want to see if you can give me an answer where you're at on that. When I said you're searching for something, is it a hope to find it and come to some point of contentment, or do you think the search goes on until you die? What's your thought on that?
Well, I think asking that question is the assumption that I'm not content. Like I told you at breakfast the other day, dude, I'm so content with where I'm at now, and the fact that like I have so much peace in the idea that I don't have to have it figured out. I'm serious,
Yeah.
and it's not like who knows. Maybe God will manifest Himself in some way where He is what Jesus is to you, to me. I don't know, because it's different now. Where it's so much bigger. Where I guess for me, I just have realized I don't put as much weight as I used to on what I believe and what I know or what I think I know, because that was the greatest lesson that seminary taught me, was so much that like, oh, you think you're smart? Well, it was like God coming in and going, bah, no, you're not. Because that was the humbling moment, is just realizing you're not going to have it all figured out. And so you may think you have certain things figured out, like Jesus may be it for you and maybe He's not. But like the difference, I love what Mike just said. It's, I don't ever want to judge anybody's relationship with Jesus or whoever else. That's not my place, man.
No.
It's never my place.
Right.
The only thing I want to do is just be like, is to be as real as I can about my pursuit, and the fact that I have contentment with where I'm at. And it's not like this, it's I've settled in this place of uncertainty. It's not. I'm not living in the land of I don't know. It's not like everything's a mirage. To me, the thing that I know is something so simplistic, but it's everything. It's like I said, God is love to me, and that's all that matters. It's love to me. When I could go hang out with my boys, and I feel that truth, I experience in that truth, because to me that's every day, right? When I get to go to Arizona with you, it's just like I get to have that relationship that I value, that like it shows me something. To me, that's where God comes in. All this stuff. So yeah, my contentment comes with the fact that I know it's something so small. It's those little truths in life where I know that like love is so important, and that peace comes out of just almost this relaxing of having to have it figured out, because I was in that world for so long, and it's just so exhausting, because it's just like, no, you don't. You're never gonna have it figured out, man. But like, it's nice to just accept that you're not gonna have so many things figured out, but to have those small little things come in that teach you. It's like how we talked about last week with relationships. Relationships are so awesome to me, and it's like I was talking about with Brittany and marriage, right? Because marriage is gets such a bad rap anymore, because you're chained to this person. Where it's so much more than that. Where it's like you can be with this person that helps teach you so much about yourself. And it's just this crazy deal where like you end up trying to give yourself to somebody, and what comes out of that. So to me, it's like those little truths like that, where like, yeah, it can be really hard sometimes. You could ask Brittany. We go to, we're working on some stuff. She'd be like, I really can't stand him so much. It's really hard for me, where I completely get that, which is cool. But like to me, it just like, it points to some real true things in life. And it's those things that get reinforced all the time. That like relationships matter, love matter. Like I don't want to keep going on this rant, but like it's the simple things. It used to be such a big thing for me, but it's not anymore. It's very simplistic.
So what just to a point, I surely don't think I have it figured out. When it comes to all this, I really don't. I believe in one thing, and I believe God is the Savior, the sovereign God. That's all I believe in. The rest of it, I don't have it figured out. If I believe it, why don't I live it better?
Yeah.
Why am I a better person?
Yeah.
Why do I struggle constantly? So it's sitting there. It's all ages is perspective. Is what Mike was saying earlier. what you realize when you look back is how foolish you were for a long time.
Mm.
That's what you realize. Man, I was
Yeah.
really stupid. It took me 30 years to figure that one out. No, I'm serious. The gift of age is just that. And you know, it's like, ask Ryan. He's been with me, and a guy comes up to me, I bet 25 years ago, and I don't even remember him. He goes, "I remember you." You know, I say to him as I cringe, "Was it a good experience for you?" Hopefully he says yeah. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes it's yes, sometimes no. If not, I'm really sorry. But that's the truth. It takes you years. When I get inspectors that come up to my son and say, "You know, your dad threatened me, throw me off the building." You think that's a proud moment?
Oh,
I
man.
cringe.
Mm.
Yeah, that's me. That's godly Keith. Oh yeah, I've got it all figured out. Come on. The fact I don't have it figured out, but I anchor my base. What I have figured out is what I believe in,
Mm.
what I choose to believe in.
Mm.
That's it. That's all I have figured out. Nothing else.
What do you believe in? I mean, what is truth to you?
You had to ask.
You probably covered this in another podcast. I didn't see it.
I haven't. Don't worry. You haven't missed out. Yeah, you've already watched 3.5 too many.
Oh no,
Yeah.
I'm going through all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I got to get to this one.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, man.
Well, I appreciate you asking. And as Ryan said earlier, he and I mirror each other, interestingly enough, having had such different experience-based cultivations of what we believe and not believe to be true. It's crazy that we have such mirroring views, and pretty much every ounce of that has to do with what he said about love, open-endedly, about that being the most simplistic, like God not being spelled G-O-D, like to him, I feel like I don't want to speak for him, but it's L-O-V-E, like it's love, and it's a very complex metaphysical, spiritual, theological. I mean, there's so much that goes into that simplistic statement of life being about love and the energy that combusts from that, and what does love even mean? So for me, I believe in everything he believes in, but the unique context of that through my experience-based understanding of what love is God even means is to rewind back to that super sad night where the wife asked me if I believe in God, and I very promptly said, "Fuck no." And I said after that, I'm so fucking exhausted of being so fucking exhausted. And that was not even me audibly saying it. That was my soul like whispering that in defeat. Like, and what's so interesting is I'm probably going to say some contradictory things about, I'm sure I'm portraying myself as like Jesus is a joke to some extent. But what's so funny is I very secretly don't tell anyone, not that we're being live broadcasted, don't tell anyone that Jesus is actually my biggest hero. Hands down, irreversibly. And a part of me is really not happy about that because of how I grew up and what God was to me through the avenue of Jesus. And it's I'm hoping at some point there'll be a punchline in a few years where, like Ryan said, like at the end of I hope I die and I wake up and Jesus is like, "Got you," you know. It's just a weird, sick joke. But for me, that night, I had a very reluctant conversation with God, even though I very not eloquently told my wife I don't believe in God. I was like, "All right, here's the deal. I know you're not there, but if you are, we need to talk because your secretary has absolutely not been getting you the mail I've sent." And I said, "I don't know if you're the mother, father, you're your source of energy. I don't know what you are. My life has taught me that you are absolutely not there, and you absolutely don't care. And if you have infinite power, then you have so intentionally reserved all of it for everyone else but me. And this whole cancer thing and the short ending after surviving that other stuff, I was like, you don't even have the fucking balls to have me get hit by a car. It's like, here's this slow IV drip of death that no doctor knows how to solve." And it was like the most cowardly father, like everything I thought fatherly, maternal love to be. It was like, That makes sense. That makes sense. So it was a dark conversation, but I literally was at a point of potentially looking at mortality and feeling like, look, if you are there, you owe me something. You got to give me something. Like if you are, I need to know. And I've touched on this story before with Ryan, but the next morning, I very reluctantly opened that book and the Bible, and it was the most non-cheesy way. It opened up to First John, and it said, literally, this is why I'm not happy about Jesus. I'm not happy about God in the Bible, but this is how it happened verbatim. I opened it, and it was First John, and it said, God is love. If you don't know God, if you don't know what love is, then you know what God is. I'm probably really botching it up, but that's more or less what the passage says. And for me, it was like this tidal wave of, that's why life has never made sense. I have never felt and absorbed what this idea of love is. And how could God or life itself make sense if this book and this environment I've grown up in is talking about this thing called love? How is life supposed to make sense if I have zero context? All I have is hate and fear towards this idea of love and God being associated. So I was like, sweet. So here's the whole Bible summed up in a couple words. God is love. I don't know what that means. Life doesn't make sense. Awesome. So I was like, all right, God, if you are love, I don't even know what that means. If you are this thing, this concept, then prove it. Like, man up. And so crazy. That day at work, there was a girl. Um, she was a dishwasher, and I'll say this story as quick as I can because it's the most important thing for me in my spiritual journey. I have a very high emotional intelligence with people, and I unfortunately can typically know what they're thinking before they're thinking it, because as a child growing up in a very hostile emotional environment, you have to read people and you have to know what they need in order to be okay in their eyes. And I graduated with a doctorate of golden retriever. Like, I know how to give people what they want. Like, I'm a seeing eye dog times 12.
Yeah.
And but I could see the sadness in this girl, and I went up to introduce myself, and she couldn't even look up. She couldn't even. There wasn't even like, she was so weighted in whatever she was feeling, and I, just politely said, "Okay, social cue. Don't acknowledge. All right." But there was a soul gut tug of war. I like that said audibly in my soul, she can't even look up at you, and she can't even acknowledge you because she's been hurt so much. Maybe you should explore giving that thing that you don't even know about, and being love, obviously. And it was so tangible. And so I was like, sweet, let's go have another awkward conversation with someone that doesn't want to talk to me. So I went up to her and I was like, here's the deal. I got her attention. I made her look at me. And I was like, unfortunately, I know you got something going on. I'm probably going to get fired. This is an HR violation to, press into someone's privacy.
Yeah.
You clearly didn't want to meet me. So if you don't want to meet me, I should probably ask about your life privately. So that's what makes sense. So nonetheless, I did. And I was like, here's the deal. I can tell you got some heavy stuff going on. None of my business. You don't want to meet me. I know that. But I know what it's like to be in that place and you feel alone. And I just need you to know that you're not alone. And if at any point you want to talk to someone, know that there's not a more safe person to have a conversation with. And she's looking at me like deer in the headlights. And she didn't say anything, and I walked away and was preparing to receive my exit letter and get fired. And but later that evening, she came by and she asked if I wanted to talk. And before she could even ask, I could tell she was. And I was like, absolutely, let's do this. And we ended up having this super intense, heavy conversation after work, and she just obviously a horrific laundry list of sadness. And I was like, here's the deal. I'm not going to attempt to tell you how to handle any of this. I just want you to know that I think you're incredible, and I think you're bearing a load that most people would have already crumbled under. So that's got to say something about how powerful you are and how much potential you have. And I just spoke a lot of positivity, sincerely, not empty words, but just some sincere love into her. And went home, and next day came to work. She gave me a letter, and clearly I was too busy to read it. And I was like, I assumed it was a thank you, nonetheless. And I went to my car after work, and I read it, and she said she was going to commit suicide. And the fact that I took the time to obviously uninvitedly inject myself into her life and speak what I said, it made her want to keep trying, essentially, is what it said.
Wow.
And that rocked my world.
Yeah, buddy.
It rocked, and I was like, and that's why I'm so annoyed with Jesus in the Bible, because you can't concoct, or you can't evoke and package that kind of moment up. It was so unwanted by me. It was subtly invited in a mocking way to have a moment that clarified everything that never made sense in my previous 25, 26 years of life. In one moment, it all hit me, and as clearly as I could translate it, it was God saying, "Here's the deal. Like, I have loved you your whole life." And
yeah, buddy,
it's a word.
And I made you so strong that I knew you could handle all the hurt, and you needed to hurt that much, because once you've experienced and learned what love is in this kind of a way, there's something that's going to come out of that it's going to change things for some people. And it takes someone willing to bear that kind of burden, and willing to be so isolated, and to know they're going to live life feeling alone all the time because no one else can relate to them, and to be okay with that, and to see it as beautiful. That takes such a unique person. And I loved you so much that I had to let you go and go through that. And my heart broke more than your heart is breaking right now, to see my child go through that. And I believe God is the perfect mother, the perfect father, the source of everything that is everything. And for me, my understanding of the power of love and what it can do, and the power of love from a place of blindly giving the thing that you so desperately want, without it being a currency-based transaction, which is the most opposite translation of love Webster even attempts to write about, because it doesn't make sense, because love is currency. The church is one of the biggest culprits of that currency, with the rules and the conditions of your worthiness of being loved. And I believe the church is the facilitator. The Western church specifically is the stock market trading, New York Stock Exchange skyrise building, because they make these mega churches, and they're just basically like, here is God, here's the currency, this is how you distribute it, this is if and when you give it, it's because these people deserve it. So it just brought so much clarity and so much peace. And what's so beautiful is so much of the chaos in my heart was not just because of the eating disorder, and it was, the eating disorder was a symbol of it was a manifestation of I was starving for love. That's what that's what it was, and I couldn't digest the fact that I was worth being loved. And that physically manifests. That's extreme. And then getting the cancer after that, it was like, in that moment, giving that love to that girl, it's like God was saying, I needed you to physically face death at an early age, because you needed to see that the real cancer in your heart and everyone's heart is they have no idea how loved they are. Wow. And the simplicity with which I look at life, and the peace that I have, and the happiness that I don't seek, the freedom I feel every day, is because I know everything is happening the way it's supposed to. Everything happened in my life the way it was supposed to. I don't need to think about the future moments. All I am worried about is, today am I embodying the best version of love I can facilitate from a place of selflessness. But the interesting part of that is, you have to, and you alluded to this, you have to know how to love yourself so much and respect yourself so much from a place, and you learn this the most in a marriage, on your conditional exchange with, why aren't you giving me the love I'm trying to give you? And this rule that you're keeping tally, this back and forth, is you have to, when I believe Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself, the most important part of the Bible is learning to love yourself first before you even attempt to love your neighbor. Because until you know how to love and respect yourself, to the extent that you don't need anything from anyone, you're always going to want to take something from your neighbor when you love them. You know what I mean? So that's what I believe truth is. I believe truth is one's ability one's ability to perceive their level of honesty with how much they're loving, and what are the conditions in which they're giving that love. And I believe this is where Ryan and I mirror each other, is I have no desire to be in a box the rest of my life, because the freedom I have with exploring how to evolve in my understanding of what love is and give that thing and be honest about when I gave it with a little bit of desire to get something in return. Like that's what I foresee. However many years God gives me, and that's why I can be so brutally honest with Ryan in these podcasts. Is I knew I needed to do this with Ryan when he asked me to do it, because it's the last thing I wanted to do. I want to live my life quietly. I don't want to talk about these things. I don't want to be vulnerable and honest in public. But it's the most loving thing I can do, is to be as honest as I can with the things that I've learned in my life. And
so is loving God being in a box? When you say you don't want to be in a box, right? I believe what Ryan and you have, when you talk about the box, it's the church, it's all the regulations that your parents put on you as you were a child going through. I get that box, okay, but when you say so when you use the word God, how many years God lets me have? Are you talking the same God I'm talking?
I believe so.
Do you believe in God?
I believe there is a conscious energy holding everything together. Everything's too perfect. I believe love is the purest form of the extension of that energy. I believe God is in another dimension that we don't have the sensory ability to even perceive, and I'm okay with that. The reason I don't think being in a box, for me and my lived experience, is a claustrophobic thing that has prevented my soul from growing. I don't project that onto anyone. I think everyone's living the life that they have to the best of their ability. My ability to perceive what that means for them is what it is, and I don't think anyone should think how I think. I want to encourage people to continue thinking about if their thoughts are the truest thoughts they could think. And I think where people trip up a lot is, I've thought this thought, it's given me enough contentment with where I'm at, and I'm no longer going to think any more thoughts. And the thing that excites me about pursuing truth open-endedly outside of a box is, I know that I don't know, and I know I'll never know the ultimate truth in a proven way, ... And that, to me, doesn't make me want to run away to be in a like-minded group of people to just be content with those thoughts. The way I'm wired in my life experiences, I am excited about exploring everything that's out there. And it's a very open-ended thing, but I don't project that onto anyone. I don't think anyone's less than or more than me at all.
I think it's really interesting how you, in that situation that you talked about with the girl who's doing the dishes, that you, in essence, you're looking for love, but you found love because you gave love.
And that's what
Isn't that incredible?
Well, it is incredible. It is, and I think it's important to highlight. And that's for me is actually the most important part of the whole recipe. Is I was looking for meaning in life externally out here, waiting to receive it. I was waiting to be the recipient of the thing that's the meaning of life. Just as a popping popcorn every day, hoping that I perceive something on this projected screen of my reality that, oh, there it is. This is meaning. But that's what's so fascinating, and that's what's so powerful to me about the story of Jesus, is he gave himself to death. He believed what he believed to death to be a symbol of what love is. And it's not a coincidence to me that life made sense when I finally had the courage to blindly give myself to someone fully in a moment with having a lot of reasons not to.
Right.
I have a feeling
easy. Yeah.
It made a lot of sense not to do it, yet there was something in me that said, there's a mystery here that needs to be solved, and I don't know what it is. And everything that's culturally told me to run away from this scenario, there's something in me that's breaking through it and says, I need to give this thing. And that's what
That's cool.
that's
It's really cool. It's
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
So the thought that I have when you're saying this, and I don't mean to minimize.
No,
Trust me,
no, I know.
minimize what you dealt with growing up, because there was a horror in that, and on a young child, and I truly don't. When I hear you talk, and even this story, what I kept thinking about is you got over the why me, why did this happen to me, and you got over that enough to come out of yourself to help somebody else. Yeah. That story was beautiful, man. That just sent a chill through me.
I appreciate that.
No, it was pure. It was pure love. Yeah. But to me, it was the gift to feel that and to go back. Not that you went, even going once and walking away, but to go back. Yeah. I mean, that's to me, when I hear that stuff, to me, it's a God moment. Yeah. It just is. But it's so easy. It would be so easy for you to stay with the rage and the hurt
Absolutely.
of everything you've dealt with in your life.
Absolutely.
And it's the blessing to be able to come out of that to help somebody else. Absolutely. And to me, that would be, to me, that's like a flower that never bloomed. And then finally one day it popped open. Yeah. That's what that story, that's the thoughts that were going through my head as you're telling. It was just a beautiful story. Yeah. But it was like being able to get over that pain.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate you saying all of that sincerely. And I think that was the most important part for me, is to essentially man up and to no longer be a victim of anything, but just be an understander of so much of life is unexplained chaos. Yeah. And if you take time to dissect it, you can find some level of reasoning from a psychology standpoint for why people are doing what they're doing. Everyone's doing what they're doing for a good reason. It's not a good reason, but there's reason behind it. But for me, when I finally was able to essentially get out of that cocoon of misery, is I realized that every day I live in misery. And I think this is where Ryan transitioned out of his sadness, perceived, is it was a choice. And that's something that rocked my world. Is I read a book by Eli Frankel. He was in concentration camps, and he was a doctor, and he became this radical psychologist. And he basically diagnosed that guys and gals who survived Auschwitz and that horrific travesty, is he was able to diagnose that they made a conscious choice to not be a victim and be drowned by that. So it's oversimplifying the story in his diagnosis as a psychologist, but it made me realize that, well, like what I went through was like a walk in the park comparatively to what the Auschwitz had those victims had to go through. And it made me realize, like, I am only a victim of what I choose to be a victim of.
Right.
And the things that hurt me are actually the things that are the greatest gifts in my life.
Right.
So as a grown-ass man who takes ownership of everything now, I am no longer, I give myself the gift of never being a victim of whatever pain is introduced in my life, because I see it now. I have this infrared vision where I can see through all of my pain. I'm like, that's a blessing in disguise. That's a gift. And I am not happy with the feelings, the sensory that's saying run away, but I can press into it now in the same way, not to be a gym rat and talk about the gym and that, but it's your spiritual evolution and that ability to take ownership. It's a muscle. It's a muscle. And that ability to not be a victim and to choose to say everything that's happened in my life, for better, for worse, the reason why I don't choose to seek happiness specifically is because I'm able to have happiness because of how much pain I've had. And the level in which I can look into my daughter's eyes, not to compare other fathers and whatever, but like how it makes me feel. The depth of that, the joy I have in building a fort and baking with her, making a unicorn cake this last weekend, and just her joy. It's like, if my dad wasn't what he wasn't, or what he was, like I have all the gratitude to give to him because of the meaning I get to have in these moments. And if I had a great dad and a great family, like, I'd be a fullback in the NFL. No question in my mind. I'd be a millionaire and have a horrific like trail of sadness behind me because of my ego and selfishness and blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, just the humility in which I can live my day to day and the meaning I can draw from it is 100% of what my dad cultivated. The sadness he cultivated was the soil that I now draw from that flower you see blooming was because of the pain. So we're only victims of what we choose to be a victim of.
Dude, that was powerful stuff. I'm just wondering. I guess I'm wondering, diving through everything that we've gone through, of just how I, what comes to my mind is Uncle Joe listening to this right now, and the thought that comes through your head when you hear people talk like
What's up,
you
Uncle
do,
Joe?
Jordan, right? Where you're very well spoken and poetic and powerful in the way that you speak, and I think it could come across as, especially when you talk about the church and the way it is something that I don't know, it's a prison trap, and so I want to talk more about, I guess, the prison trap, and is it also a place of actual salvation and what that looks like. Just to kind of wrap this thing up. We're almost been talking for 2 hours, but I think it would be good to end on, because I think most people listening to this are you know, more on the Christian side, where I think it's really easy to judge when we're talking and how we're talking about how it can be such a bad thing. And I guess I think it would be worthwhile just to talk about, I guess, why you feel like it could be a bad thing, and then also, I guess, end it too, where like how you guys feel like it's been such a life transformative thing where you want to stay attached to, because it's fueling you with the spirit and the soul and the meaning of life that really gives you the oomph to keep going, you know. So I think it would be a good thing to talk about. So let's start there, dude. I just want to know, when you talk about the church that way, to expound on that a little bit, how is it some place that can be a death camp, but how is it also the place that can be the place where you find life?
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna say probably 30 seconds worth of words, and I'm gonna flip it back on you because I've been overly selfish with my time. Um, with everything in life, I think it all comes down to motivation, and the topic being truth. Your capacity to be honest about what motivates you to be in that environment. And I think I have perceived a front row seat to so many versions and flavors of organized religion growing up in so many churches. And um, I've seen a lot of different motives manifest in what makes people want to be there, and the security that it brings. So I'm just going to say some open-ended stuff, and not even really dissect it, because I think I've made it abundantly clear what I think about things to a fault. Um, so I think it's all about motivation, and I think that's where I have infinite compassion. And I don't think, when I say someone's in a box, I'm so jealous of the box that you say you're content to be in, because to hear someone say, to get to your season of life that you're in, and to have the level of sincere gratitude and peace and contentness with where you're at, I'm like that sounds like heaven. You need to have that peace inside that box. I'm like, what is in there? Can you give me a backdoor key? Can I sneak in and hang out in the box for a little bit? There's something so beautiful about that. So if your motivation is sincere, to be in a place of peace and to just love your neighbor as yourself, like, how could I not be compassionately encouraging you to continue? So that's where my compassion is. Like, I don't think anyone's wrong for doing what they're doing. All I say is I encourage you to say, what is your motive?
I just tell you the one thing, what church is to me, because church is not, I'm not proper mainstream in my thoughts of church. I am the guy that sits in the last row, in the last pew, closest to the door. Okay? That's what I have been.
True.
For soul
My
fire
whole
drills.
life. From being a kid, when we didn't want to sit with my dad when we were growing up in church, my dad said, you can sit anywhere you want as long as it's in front of me. And so in that,
It's heavy.
I chose, when I had my own choice, I sat first one out the door, man. When I want to leave, I don't want to disrupt anyone. I want to get out. Okay? So that's what I do. I do that to this day. Okay? Church is, to me, a lot of times I get more out of the worship service than I do out of the
Hmm.
Okay. The church we go to in Arizona has like the most incredible worship service, and man, I'll sing a song, will bring a tear to my eyes, and I'll get a feeling that comes over me, and man, I just thank God for that moment because I think it's a God moment. And I say, Lord, thank you for that moment. Okay. There's obviously some good word, but I don't fellowship a lot in that world, and maybe I'm wrong for that, but I do my thing. And but church isn't a meet and greet per se to me. I don't want phony relationships. I say hi to enough people in the day. I don't say five more. I really don't.
Yeah.
When you can't say hi to me until the pastor says, "Hey, can you turn around and say hi to someone sitting with you?"
That's
You can't walk in and shake my hand and say good morning to me. I really don't want to shake your hand when because someone's telling you this.
It's
Shake
the
my hand.
worst.
Okay,
Yeah.
so, but there's something about being in a group of people worshiping and singing that has power to me,
It's beautiful.
and it helps my soul. That's why I go to church.
Hmm.
Church for me, I went to a lot. I went to a lot of different churches, especially growing up, and some pretty radical churches, which I always enjoyed.
Sure.
Freak my kids out, but so I kind of agree with Keith. I really love the worship part of church. I mean, I think that's a real draw, and I think sometimes that's because you're really in communication with God yourself. You're not just standing there listening to somebody talk about it. But I also think that, see, to me, this right here is church.
Was you there?
And there's just a lot of things that can go on here, and you can learn a lot of things. And your story about love. I mean, there's no pastor that's going to stand up and give us that kind of story. I mean, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So what's just always bothered me about church is just the rule part of church. That's what's just
The
always
conditional
bothered
love part.
me. Yeah, that's what's always bothered me. And I have to be careful because my son-in-law is my pastor. I go to his church, so I got to be really careful because I love my church. Okay?
Yeah. We couldn't stop him talking about it. I can't wait to tithe there. Get all the money. Yeah.
But I also think that a person doesn't have to go to church to be there, to make it. I mean, it's like I said, it's when you understand that your relationship is your personal relationship between you and Jesus Christ, that's when it all comes clear to me.
Yeah.
That's when it all comes clear. The rest of it, the organizational part of it is about communicating with other people, hanging out with other people. The part I love the most at my church is when Mark says, shake somebody's hand. I love that because I'm going all over the church, until he's telling me I got to sit down. I'm the last one to sit down because that's what I love. I love to communicate and have the relationships, and so that's what it is for me. But I think we just need to, so many times, break down the walls and just think about where we are, because church to me is happening a lot.
Yeah. So with the church, would the wall be the reason that you don't take your kids to church and Sunday school? Where does that fit? I know you don't necessarily. Brittany takes the boys to church, but does your little girl go to church and all? She has Sunday school. Does your theory in that to bring your little one to church?
Yeah, it's a great question. Ryan and I originally were meeting on Sundays when my wife would take my daughter to church because I think it's pretty obvious I don't want to be there. But I do believe it's incredibly important to facilitate environments for little minds to teach them about truth. And I think Jesus has an infinite amount through his life lived to um, mold the mind about truth. I love the idea of her being around um, the avenue of Jesus's truth. But I know full well, like, it's just an environment for her. I know that she's going to grow up and have her own thoughts about her own perspectives, and I know that I'm utterly out of control of what she's ultimately going to decide. But on the same token, the flip side of that is, I know that what I do in my actions, not with my speech, conveys to her what I believe every moment I'm with her, and the amount of love that I channel through my actions with her. I believe I'm, like you said, when you're with another individual, and the emotional exchange is that of the divine love that is God. Um, that is church, and frankly, I think that's what Jesus was conveying when he said, "Where one or more are gathered in my name, I will be there." And I think that's a metaphysical statement of, when you are connected to another individual in the heartbeat of love and transparency and acceptance, there's a divine thing happening. And I think that is church. It's not a structural thing. It's an emotional connection. And um, I believe um, it's incredibly important to my wife, for my daughter, to be in that environment. And part of being a spouse is um, supportive compromise to a degree,
Mm-hmm.
because I know where my little daughter's mind is molded, and what comes of her life infinitely supersedes anything she's ever going to be in on a 30-minute session at Sunday school. And it's important enough to my wife to do that. It's not something I'm going to fight her about, and because there's plenty of other things to pick from to fight about. And but yeah, and that's part of that is how compassionate and open I am to other people's journeys and paths. Is the last thing I want to do is project an agenda on anyone. I believe everyone has the divine right to pursue God in their own timing and in their own way, and it's too unique to say it's got to be a specific way. My belief and my hope in what God did with me, just that one of the stories that I shared, there's so many other moments like that in my life. And I will always be an advocate that your relationship with God is 1,000,000% between you and God.
All right.
And no environment, no Sunday school, no church will ever rob you of that. So, yeah, it's kind of where I'm at.
So, Ryan, what's the deal with you and the boys? Is it the same thing? You just okay with it because Brittany wants to take them?
Well, here's the thing about that. So I told Brittany that I'd go to certain churches with her. You know, we went to the one she goes to now, and I told her I wasn't really feeling it, so I wouldn't. You know, she wanted to go there, she could go there. I'm just not going to be a part of it. It wasn't a church that I guess I connected to. But the thing about this process with the kids is, I really trust my wife, and I really look at myself like, like I said earlier, like, I don't put a lot of weight in what I know or all this stuff. So I know with her, like, she loves God, she's pursuing God, she loves our kids, and she believes it's where they need to be. Who am I to say that that's not? That's where I'm at. For me, I don't feel like that's the place for me. It doesn't mean I'll never go. I've talked to her about going. It's just not something, it's not a place where I necessarily go. It's small. I don't, do everything they do at that church. It's just more of an uncomfortable place. Not saying it couldn't be a good place, but I think the reason I really don't like going is because it makes me go back to these beliefs that I have with church in itself. And I feel like with church, it isn't necessarily about helping people find truth as it is about helping people find the God that you walk into the building for. And sometimes that God you walk into the building for can be this profound, life-changing God, but sometimes it could also be, you're going in, you hear this testimony about, wow, this dude wasn't a drug addict. Oh my gosh, he was just like a life just like mine. Now I'm going to believe in this God. It's like, well, so what did you just build that on? Do you build it on somebody's story because they could fix you? Is that how you find truth? Like, to me, that's not something that I think is a very healthy alternative, because I think the foundation of it is so weak. So to me, when it comes to church, I think it's so much about, it's about pursuing God in a sense of like pursuing what's real, what's true, and not just this one way deal where you sit in a chair and somebody just blasts you with information. I've went to school with so many of the people that are going to be teaching this stuff, and I'm scared to death that they're going to be teaching churches. And to me, it's just like, why do I have to sit there and just go intake mode? Like, no, I don't think that's a good thing, because I think God gave us a mind for a reason, not to be controlled by it, but as a check. And as a check sometimes, because otherwise you could go to a church and people could take advantage of you. That's what happens with these televangelists, right? People just turn their minds off. They believe what they're saying. They give them all the money they have to this person who buys a Learjet, and that's it. There's a reason there's a check and a balance for it. So yeah, like to me, I think that church can be an amazing thing, but I think it's completely dependent upon the person who walks into that church. And to me, I think that's what's wrong with the church in so many ways, because I think church should be so much more of an avenue to connect and help people connect to God in whatever that looks like, and not just this doctrine that I feel like is presented as this rock solid thing when it's not. And I think that was the biggest eye-opening thing for me, is when I studied the Bible, is just like, it's not as solid as I thought it was. Like, to me, it was so concrete, and then realizing it's not. It's something that you have to take on faith. There's too much human in the book to think it's so inerrant, because it's not inerrant. And once you realize that, then you're like, okay, what do you do if you built it on inerrancy, or you built it on like God's coming to change your life? What do you do if you hear the testimony of someone who's a drug addict, and then you were like, oh, this could fix me, and then you're on the path, and I'm not a drug addict anymore. Then you become a drug addict. Is it my fault that I screwed up? So that's the problem I have with it. I think it's so much bigger than that, where I don't want it to be so much more like this shame-based cycle. Because when I was going through all my stuff, when I went and met with so many different pastors in the area, people I respected, all these different, and tried to listen to what they had to say about all my questions and where I was at. And it was just such a disappointing response from so many of them. It was basically like, oh, you're just down the wrong path. Just really try to pray more, read your Bible more. And it's just like, okay, so I'm failing, right? It's on me? Because that seems like a really opposite approach. When I read the Bible, it's pretty much on God. God's the one giving you grace. God's the one revealing himself to you. Why is it on me? So yeah, when I look at church, it's like, I look at it as two different things. One, it could be this fantastic place. You can go and meet God and have your world rocked and learn how to love and connect. And it could be in so many different types of churches. It doesn't have to be one type of church, but it could also be the worst thing for you too. And I do believe that, because it goes back to that idolatry thing, where if God already is an idol for you, a lot of churches just reinforce that idol. And that's a horrible place to be. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think, like what you said, Mike, is so important, because this is church to me. It's not about a building or some pastor who has some degree like I have telling you what to do. I'd be scared to death to tell someone what to do and what to believe. I don't want to do that and be responsible for you. So where does that come from? How does this person have that sort of confidence that they can do that? To me, it's something where I think it needs to kind of lean on the side more of faith. Like, hey, I feel like this is what God's telling me. And there's a little part of me that's not unsure. It's not like rock solid, do this. So I think that's the hard part for me. When I look at Brittany taking the boys to church, if I look at selfishly, I'm like, no, don't take them to church. But it's not about me. And the thing about it is, I look at it as they can go to church with Britt, and like, it could be their avenue to connect with God. I just take myself out of it. I trust and love my wife. She's doing it to the best of her ability. I'm okay with not having it figured out and not getting my way. You know what I mean? If I had my way, I don't know, I'd do something else with them on that day. Doesn't mean I never take them to church, but it'd be different. You know what I mean? So it's as much of me having to surrender to that all the time. Like when she takes them to church, I have to surrender to the idea of like, I trust my wife. She's on her own path. It's a little different from mine. And it's okay. It's a really hard thing for me to, try to reconcile. Because if it was just up to me, it would look way different, but it's not. And I'm trusting in God in the sense that he's talking to my wife just like he's talking to me. And that could be, her path may look different with taking the boys there, but we're still on the same path in a way. You know what I mean? So it has a lot to do with me having to say, I don't have it figured out. And going back to what you said, Jordan, it does. I have to go to there constantly when it comes to it. Because if I look selfishly, I'm like, oh man, she's taking these kids. They're brainwashing her with stuff that may or may not be true and getting them to indoctrinate themselves, right? If I go to that atheistic place in my brain. where it's just, I don't know. It's just something that it's a lesson for me because I have to trust in God or a higher power and things having figured out, not me. And that's the hardest part when it comes to it.
Yeah, and I think that the church thing is it, it's always been difficult for me because I saw my sister go through some things in church, my oldest sister, and myself when I was, in my younger years, 19, 20, and I'm living on the river in Idaho, living on the Snake River, and taking my baths in the river. And I didn't know I was homeless then. I just thought I was camping, but I guess I was homeless. Today it'd be considered homeless. But but I still wanted to go to church, and I hitchhiked. I didn't have a car. I hitchhiked 15 miles to this church, and it was pretty good. I kind of enjoyed it, and so I went there about 3 times, and of course my hair's a little longer, and I was clean because I so I wasn't stinking when I went in there, but then the pastor one morning gets up and he just starts talking because I come in and I got shorts on, I got flip flops on in Idaho, which was kind of strange, I guess, and had long hair, and pastor didn't like it, so he had a little sermon on that and how you dress, and respecting God and respecting the church, and and basically just pointing me out. And I just sit there and go, man, really? I mean, I just hitchhiked 15 miles on a Sunday morning to come over to go to this church, and so that's because I think one of the biggest problems with churches right now is communication and transparency. If you have a drug problem and you don't want to talk about it, the one place you should be able to talk about it is in church.
Yeah. Hospital.
If you're having a problem with your wife's having a problem with you, as a Christian, where should you be able to go? You should be able to go to your church. That's the first place. It's not even necessarily a pastor. It's just somebody else that can communicate with you, that cares about you and what you're going through. But unfortunately, for the most part, churches, that's not what they are. And it's that's the difficult thing. And I think it's a difficult thing for a lot of people, because people have problems in their life, and Christians have just as many problems as non-Christians, believe it or not. I mean, you guys know that.
Yeah.
And so where do you want to go? You ought to be able to go to that place where everybody's supposed to love you, but instead they judge you.
We don't have that in groups. Forget church. Small groups don't have that. You're comfortable sharing your story in front of certain people. You don't. Because they're going to judge you because of it.
Yeah.
That's right.
So, part of what it is, why I say I sit in the last row. We had a guy in our church growing up, and you want to say like stick in your mind. Okay, one of my brothers got in trouble. Well, one of the deacons in the church was a probation officer who couldn't stand my father, and he was the probation officer for my brother. And the first thing, once he got the case, that he did was go in the church and tell everyone in the church about my brother's troubles, to embarrass my father. Now, forget embarrassing my father, like the hurt that it did to my mother.
Yeah.
Oh, irreversible. Yeah.
So you had 3 sons that wanted to beat this guy's ass.
Yeah.
And we're going to church.
May or may not have.
Okay? So it's amazing how that sticks with you sometimes. So in church, if I go to try to connect with God, what we're saying, I don't want some hypocrite fool taking me out of my mode.
Yeah.
I need my moment, I don't want to meet a ton of people in that mode. I want to have that moment that, and I can close my eyes and if there's a word for me. Mm-hmm. Sometimes church is a great word. I mean, I'll leave church and I'll say, my word, I was supposed to be there today. Mm-hmm. There's other times I look at the guy getting up and I leave 2 seconds after he starts preaching. I'm like, I'll listen to this guy. Mm-hmm. So I'm being judgmental, I'm being all this stuff, but I'm being honest. I'm not sitting there going to listen to a guy just because I said I went to church. Yeah. I'm not. So am I wrong for that? Am I wrong because I don't socialize in church? throw the darts. You hit a bullseye half the time you throw them at me.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's who I am. I that's not what I go for. I go for a connection and with a spirit sometimes flowing in a church that I need. It's a fix.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
100%.
I deal in a world of chaos. We deal in a world, I say all the time, of personalities that are difficult to get along. You know, I go to start my day to day with a guy that doesn't want to pay us on a bunch of change orders. And so I have to, and we're doing emails, and I'm like, I'm a face to face guy. We face to face guy, you know what? He gives me everything I want.
Of course.
Okay? So emails, he's a big tough guy, doesn't want to pay me. Okay? So 5 minutes after that. So that's, you know, and it puts me in that mind frame that isn't a happy place. And so for me, if I can have a time where I can just kind of forget about everything, Saturday group is a great, what I've appreciated in our 20 years we've been together on Saturday group with Mike and I and 5, 6, 7 other guys, but there's only been 3 or 4 of us that have been there the whole time. But you know, I've learned to value my friend Mike. I've learned that I can share with my friend Mike and I trust him.
Right.
That's what that's about for me. I don't share everything in group.
Yeah.
What I'm thinking sometimes, but Mike and I will go have a beer, and I trust him, and he trusts me that we can tell each other our struggles. We can, you know, and that's there's power in that. And so, but I don't think going to church. But when I go back to children, it's going back to just it's like going to school almost. It's just a foundation and a belief to get them going. They're going to choose their own path. You know what I'm saying? But it's just, why do I think sometimes people that grow up in church is the most screwed up people?
Yeah,
Facts.
that's true.
Why do pastors' kids usually turn out to be a mess?
Yeah, I'm fine. I don't know what time I gave.
No, is that true?
Yeah.
So there's no logic to it. There's
Yeah.
no right and wrong.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Right?
Mm.
So, you know, it's just for me, as I just want to see my grandkids have a foundational piece that at least they'll grow up with and then get to the point where they can choose for themselves.
At least have a compass.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all.
Well, and I think that was really cool about what we did here tonight is talk about each of our compasses and how they've led our journey a little bit differently. And I think it's cool when you could sit here and the 4 of us just talk openly and honestly. And I think that's what preaches to people, you know, that to me is such a message for God and everything you're talking about, when someone can sit and listen to, you know, what you said, Jordan, and the different experiences we've all shared. And it's something that's really powerful.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, is there anything else that we want to talk about before we end it? You guys good?
You're not recording this, are you?
Yeah.
Man. But yeah, so to anybody that listened, we hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, we're going to post this thing and see what people think. Thanks for tuning in.
Hey, thanks.
All right. What'd you think?